for any of you who have been paying attention, and hopefully that's all of you, we have been going through the book of James. And guess what? We started with chapter 1 in James. Kind of made sense. Then we did chapter 2. So what do you think's next? Come on.
Chapter 3.
Yes. Okay. Now, I may have let a few people in my circle know that I was going to be doing this message today and that I was going to be talking about James. And I even let a couple people know I was going to be talking about James 3. Now, if I were to ask you, you're all the men and women on the street. And if I were to ask you, what do you know about James 3? What would you say? What? I didn't hear. Thank you. Okay. You can always count on the pastor for an answer. If you didn't hear him, he said tongues. Everybody knows James 3. It's about the tongue. Guess what I'm not talking about today? The tongue. Because believe it or not, there's other stuff in the 3rd chapter of James. And one of those things is wisdom. And if you caught some of the different sections of the readings that Noah read for us today, he mentioned wisdom a couple of times. So I want to ask you, have you ever thought about what makes a person wise? Have you? What is your idea of a wise person?
Somebody with common sense.
Thank you. Good. Anybody else? It's okay to talk when I'm talking. Okay? I encourage you. Yes?
Someone that gives good counsel.
Thank you. Very good example. Now, when the world thinks of wise people, they may have a little bit of a different impression. They would often think, well, maybe a wise person is someone who looks nerdy. They wear glasses. They dress up. They wear suits when it's okay to wear suits, but nobody else is wearing a suit. And they wear a sport coat when everybody else is running around in jeans and flannel shirt or jeans and a t-shirt. When I say the word wise, maybe you think of an owl. That's the animal that we've all been taught, I guess, or ingrained in us, that the old wise owl. I can't think of an owl without thinking of a Tootsie Pop. And that was one of my all-time favorite commercials as a kid, and even now. I mean, I think people who write commercials are either the smartest people in the world or the stupidest people in the world. And the guy who wrote that one was a genius. I mean, we all know it. We all remember it. And I remember the look on the little kid's face when the owl bites into that lollipop. He's just like crushed. But that's one of the things that makes us remember that commercial, because it was just so ridiculous. And, everybody was looking for a number. That's how many licks it took. Well, he gave him a number, and the number was 3. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the things that James talks about as far as wisdom. So we're in chapter 3. We're just going to blow right over verses 1 to 12 because they talk about, we know that thing. We're going to go right to 13. And we're talking and thinking about wisdom. So I gave everyone a handout that has James 13 to 18. Feel free to follow along with me, or feel free to have an extra piece of scratch paper for later. James 3:13. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show by good conduct that his works are done in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter envy and self-seeking in your hearts, Do not boast and lie against the truth. This wisdom does not descend from above, but is earthly, sensual, demonic. For where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. Now the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. All right, so just think about that for a moment, just a real quick moment. So James kind of gives us two positions that are opposed to each other. Two versions of wisdom. One which is the real deal and one which is an imitation of the real thing. We'll learn the difference between these. We'll learn the difference between those who pretend to be wise and those who really are wise. We'll see that one version of wisdom comes from above and another version comes from below. First, let's take a look at what true wisdom is. I'm going to suggest to you that there are three characteristics of true wisdom. Wisdom from above leads to good conduct. Back in verse 13, who among you is wise and understanding? By his good conduct, he should show that his works are done in the gentleness that comes from wisdom. James is setting an opportunity to show the genuineness of a person's wisdom. This is very much in line with what he has also said about faith. Now, James probably still has in mind those who desire to teach. Earlier in James, he spoke about that. And thanks to what Lisa and Leanne shared with us, we got a glimpse of that. James is giving us an if-then statement. Remember them from high school? If you have real wisdom and understanding, then you will show it by your good conduct. James is again challenging us to really demonstrate what we claim to have. Good wisdom. James is telling us that wisdom is not merely intellectual knowledge. It also involves accompanying behavior. There's got to be something behind the knowledge. It's got to be action. The wisdom that comes from God will be seen in our good conduct. And part of that conduct is gentleness. Now, some of us, and I'm going to talk to the guys because I said us, that's me. All right, gentlemen, listen up. When I say gentle, guys, who wants to be gentle? Probably not going to get a lot of people, especially men, who want to demonstrate that they're rough and tough. And I expect there's a lot of men here now that aren't like that and don't focus on just being the rough and tough he-man. We're different. I acknowledge that. And I hope you do too. We can be strong and we can be gentle. And while we're talking about it, one can also be a leader and be humble. One can be a mover and a shaker while at the same time not running over people. Gentleness is exhibited in several different ways. Gentleness means that we think of others first. Gentleness means that we are patient with others. Gentleness means that we go out of our way not to cause harm. Gentleness means that we practice self-control with others. Gentleness means that we are confident in the strength that God has given us, and we don't feel the need to intimidate people to feel that we are strong. Let me say that again. We don't need to intimidate people, or the need to intimidate people to show and feel that we are strong. So good conduct and gentleness is a sign of true wisdom, as well as someone that is changed by their belief in the gospel. The second parameter of godly wisdom, which is different from earthly wisdom. Earthly wisdom, described in verses 14 to 16, is selfish, envious. If you have bitter envy and selfish ambition in your heart, don't boast. Don't deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come from down above, but is earthly. It's unspiritual. It's demonic. For where there is envy and selfish ambition, there is disorder and every evil practice. James says that we should not boast or brag about having selfish ambition and vain conceit. We shouldn't take joy or place value in the fact that we have traits that are opposite of true displays of godliness. So what's James telling us? What is this bitter envy and selfish ambition stuff that the world seems so involved with? Bitter envy means that we really want something that someone else has. We desire to the point that we are bitter. Selfish ambition means that we are motivated to do something. We have ambition for something that serves us and only our self-interest. James says that if you have these things, you should not boast about it. In fact, you should be embarrassed about it. We are denying truth, God's truth. This is very clear, a denial of the life that the gospel calls us to live. And we don't want to deny that life that the gospel calls us to live. We should stop pretending that we have wisdom. Bottom line, what we really need is true wisdom, which only comes from God. The type of wisdom we learned about earlier in chapters 1 and 2. James does make it clear where this supposed wisdom comes from. The supposed wisdom or anti-wisdom does not come from above. It does not come from God. The good wisdom that does come from above, about which we learned from James. So if any of you lack wisdom, you should ask God for wisdom. He gives it to all generously and ungrudgingly, and it will be given to him who is deserving of it. In verse 17, every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of light, who does not change like shifting shadows. So avoid this line of thinking. Again, it's earthly. It comes from natural human origins. It is unspiritual. Again, not from God. So it must be demonic. The line of thinking, this line of thinking, is from the devil himself. James also says that envy and selfish ambition cause disorder and evil practices. Not following the way of God creates disorder and brokenness in our lives. God is not a God of confusion. He is not a God of disorder. He wants direction, order, and clarity for each of us and in our lives. But when we depart from his ways and pursue our own ways, it creates a mess. And what do we call that mess? Anybody? Thank you. Sin creates disorder, and it leads to every evil practice. We know that. We see that. And we also know how we can avoid it. So remember what verse 13 of today's passage told us, that God's wisdom is verified by gentleness and good conduct. Envy, selfish ambition, disorder, and evil practice are the opposite of gentleness and good conduct. These things are anything but true wisdom, and as we said, they are not from God. On the other hand, arrogance, envy, selfishness, and foolishness go together. As we said that gentleness, good conduct, humility, and true wisdom go together, those bad traits, unfortunately, also go together. Wisdom from above leads to good conduct. Earthly wisdom leads to selfishness and enviousness. Wisdom from above produces godly fruit. The wisdom from above is first pure, then peace-loving, gentle, compliant, full of mercy, and encourages good fruits. It's unwavering, without preference. And the fruit of righteousness is sown as peace by those who cultivate peace. So since we said that wisdom is from God, James reminds us that we should be thankful to God that he gives us true wisdom. Then James gives us the characteristics of that wisdom from above. He emphasizes we don't have to wonder what godly, true wisdom looks like. True wisdom is pure. It's not tainted by evil. It's peace-loving. True wisdom does not look for trouble, but looks for peace. True wisdom is gentle. It looks for us to be helpful to others, not harmful. It looks for us to be compliant. We don't want to try to start arguments. We want to try to be reasonable, full of mercy. True wisdom leads us to be people of mercy, quick to forgive, quick to overlook an offense. True wisdom looks for good fruits. True wisdom produces goodness in all of us. True wisdom is unwavering. It sticks to the truth in the correct ways. True wisdom does not put on a false front, but is genuine and real all of the time. Most of all, it guides us, both in the beginning and throughout, to seek peace. We are to be people of peace. We are to produce even more peace. Peace should guide us in the wisdom process. A person with true wisdom is definitely a person who sows peace. So what have we said? Wisdom is not just learning. It's not just knowledge. It's behavior and life change. I want you to think this week, think about this. Does your wisdom possess these things we just mentioned. If it does not, it's not from God. James wanted his readers then and now to know true wisdom. He wants us to experience the wisdom that is from God and to see the superiority of it over the wisdom offered by the world. Seek the wisdom of God. Seek it from God. Seek it from His Word. And seek it from His wise people. Amen.